Hi, James here. I've got the day off work today because I've had a dentist appointment. Fun, and my mouth is really dry. Anyway, I thought I'd use this opportunity to go through some of my backlogged emails, which I'm almost there, so if you're still waiting for a reply from me, bear with me, I'm nearly there. Anyway, I normally answer questions in emails that are kind of DJ or music related. But every now and again I get a question that's a little bit off topic and a little bit different. Don't get me wrong, that's fine, I welcome that. If you've got any question at all, ask me, and if I know it, then I'll answer it. If I don't know, then I'll find someone who does, and I'll get them to sit in this chair and answer the question for you. Anyway, right, this is one of the emails that I've got, which are a different question, and I printed it out. A bit easier to see. Anyway, the guy's asked me not to read his name out, so that's fair enough, that's fine. Anyway, this is the email. Hi James, I want to upgrade my computer and I want to start with the processor. I went to look for one and I didn't realise how expensive they are. Are they just a rip-off, or is there a reason why they're so expensive? The email does go on a little bit more, but basically the question is this that he's asked. Is there a reason why processors nowadays, or CPUs, are so expensive? Well, yes, there is a reason, and it's probably not what you're expecting. But to explain that, I'm going to have to just very briefly explain how they're made. And to do that, we're going to have to go into the other room, because the CPU I've got for the demo I've left in the other room, so let's go in the other room. Now, this is a processor, or CPU, whatever. It's an old AMD Athlon XP 3000. I think it's 2.2 gigahertz. Can't remember. It's over 2 gigahertz anyway. Now, in the middle of this, you can see that little square metal bit there. Now, that's called a die, and basically what a die is a piece of silicon which has got loads of transistors on it. And if I was to take this piece off now and show you what was underneath it, what you would see is this. And you're probably thinking, what on earth is that? What that is actually 91 million transistors, all packed onto a die the size of that square bit in the middle of that. Now, it's not so much the volume of transistors that makes this thing so expensive, it's the process they have to go through to get those transistors on there. Now, no, before you're thinking, it's not a poor little guy that has to sit there with a pair of tweezers and put them in one by one. No way, it's impossible, not 91 million. No, instead they use a technique which is a bit like a projector. Now, you've seen your overhead projectors, where basically you'll get things written on a thin piece of like see-through plastic, you put it on the overhead projector and it blows it up on the wall. You see them in nice schools and colleges and stuff. Basically what they do is they use the same technique but the other way round. They get a big piece of glass. I think it's 500 times what the size of the die is going to be, and depending on how many transistors as well they're putting in it. Obviously more transistors the bigger the piece of glass, but average I think the piece of glass is quite big, more than arm's width. And what they do is they use a really powerful laser to etch a pattern into this glass, which is going to be the pattern of the transistors as they're going to go into the die. Then what they do is they get a really powerful intense light and they shine it through the glass. On the other side of the glass is a small lens, and this is where the projector thing comes in. Whereby a normal projector blows things up on the wall, this lens compresses it down into a really tiny beam, and that beam is shone onto a small piece of copper. Now, I don't think they use copper anymore. I think they use a mixture of precious metals like platinum, gold and stuff, but they used to use copper mainly. And this copper, or whatever they use, this dye, has got a chemical brushed on the front of it which reacts with light. And what this chemical does is, when light hits it, it basically fuses itself to the copper, or the metal they use. And any of this chemical that doesn't get hit by the light does not bond to the metal or the copper. And obviously where they've etched the pattern of the transistors into this big piece of glass, it's going to cast shadows where they don't need the transistors to be. Now what they'll do is once they've done that, they'll rinse this little die with acid, and it's a process called etching, and what they do is they dissolve away any of the copper or whatever material it is away, leaving behind the pattern of the transistors, or the contacts for the transistors, because the chemical they put on the front has stopped that metal from being dissolved by the acid. I know it's quite hard to follow. Then what they do, they put them onto things called wafers, and that is basically a big circle piece of silicon. And I think one single wafer will have, I think, about 20 processor dies on it. Then they'll take the dies off and put them into the CPU. There's a lot more that happens in between there, but to explain that I'd have to explain how the transistor actually works, and I'll save that for another video. So you can see there's quite a lot to it. The process is quite big, and you've got to imagine as well the precision of this technology they use is just unreal. You know, and the count of transistors inside these things is getting more and more per day. I think the biggest one I've seen lately, I saw, I think it was an Intel Core Duo Extreme. It was a Core 2 Extreme, and it had, I think it was 2 billion transistors. You just imagine that, 2 billion. So, you know, the technology they use is quite precision to get 2 million in something the size of, fair enough though, the dies are slightly bigger now, but anyway, regardless to that, the processor is still no bigger than that. So, you know, so like I say, it's not the volume of transistors, how they get them on. And also as well, the environment they have to work in has to be completely clean. If we put into perspective now, if you imagine that this piece of paper was just one of the transistors, a speck of dust in perspective would be the size of a football field. So one speck of dust could completely destroy thousands of transistors on this die. So they have to do it in a completely clean environment. So, you know, to answer your question, other question, are they a rip-off? No, they're quite reasonably priced considering what they have to go through to make them. So there you go. I hope this sort of answers your question. I hope it's enlightened you in the sense that you've seen now what they have to do to make these things and why they're so expensive. They are getting cheaper. Obviously, you know, the technology they're using is getting more advanced, and it's getting easier to produce large numbers of CPUs now. So, you know, they are getting cheaper, but you have to sort of bear with it. They're going to be expensive at the moment because, you know, what they have to go through. So I hope this answers your question. If you've got any more questions, just leave comments underneath or send me a personal message, whatever. And if I know the answer, I'll tell you. Anyway, I hope this has answered your question. Thank you for watching. Nice one.